She's the technical person.
But I also have a different one, like if I end up going faster, then I can talk about my Houston toad stuff. So I have 2 presentations on there.
I let her do that.
And then with Texas Master Naturalist, we have to go through what we find down here.
What's it called?
It's in a folder called presentation.
Oh, okay.
Did not put it, yeah. Presentations are here. And then there, that one. Do that one.
Here's a control.
Perfect. So like everybody said, I'm still on LA time. My friends make fun of me. They're like, you live 5 miles from Mexico. Why did you have to fly to LA to go to Santa Barbara, to go to Ensenada, to come back and then fly back to Texas? I have no clue. But that's how it went. And so I'm still on like cruise time. And if I sway, it's because I'm still on a boat. If you've ever been on a cruise, you understand that.
Yeah.
But I always come and talk to Joni and the Texas Master Naturalist about the amphibians and reptiles, and I usually start off with what we have down here because I know you guys are kind of learning. When I do my presentations, I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk with you. So if you have any questions, then please ask. I'm going to show you the species that we have down here, and then maybe kind of their adaptations and what makes them special. And then if you have any questions about them, then just let me know and raise your or just blurt it out. It doesn't bother me any. But we're going to talk about the amphibians and reptiles of the lower Rio Grande. So what you could potentially see down here. And I say potentially because we're going to see some species that I have never seen before, and they're still kind of on my lifer list. So if you're a birder, then you understand what a lifer list is. And so we have that with reptiles and amphibians as well. This is just my background. I wish I looked like this now, but this is the background I have. I love snakes. When people run away from them, I run towards them. This is just what I've always just been in love with. So this is North Carolina. This is the mole king. This is the speckled king, North Carolina. My advisor actually, my master's and PhD, he had us learn how to tube snakes with his timber rattlesnake. We had to go through training to learn how to tube snakes. And so this is a timber rattlesnake with my advisor. Scarlet king, which is a huge lifer for me. Texas rat, we've got a hognose, black rat snake, and then of course my favorite, which is the Merodia, because they are super bitey, super awesome. I love water snakes. They're super stinky. But I've done a ton of work with snakes, and I just love it. So some of the stuff that I've done with is Houston toad. We'll talk a little bit about that. Box turtle stuff, North Carolina. Mountain yellow-legged frog, which is still waiting to be listed on the endangered species list in California. And then I've done a ton of work here. If you recognize this is actually a stero. We're at their front pond putting turtle traps in. This was in 2012. So I've done some work at a stero. So that's kind of a little bit of background on myself. Herptology, Greek meaning creepy things, which I don't think they're creepy. I think they're awesome. And of course it covers amphibians and reptiles. Amphibians is where most of my background comes in. I did a lot of toad work, especially with the endangered Houston toad, and so I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But then also reptiles, because reptiles are really big down here in South Texas. We have the turtle research, which is amazing, that has just come out with Texas Parks and Wildlife, which I don't have on here. All the laws that now don't allow you to harvest turtles because of one of my lab mates. Love it. But we have Texas tortoises, a whole bunch of different snakes that are protected. Our alligators that we have at Laguna Atascosa, all that kind of stuff. And so if we just go back to amphibian, those meaning like double life. You have amphibian meaning you from tadpole stage to adult stage. And that varies. So we live in South Texas. So what does that mean? It's hot. It's really hot all the time. Do you think our tadpoles stay tadpoles very long? Right? I mean, 30 to 60 days are going to be our max. I worked with mountain yellow-legged frog in the high Sierras where we were above 10,300 feet. So we were working in high alpine lakes that shouldn't have trout. But back in the 1960s, 40s, 60s, they used to drop trout from airplanes into these lakes so people could fish. Well, there's a frog there that's very special. And they, because the temperature is so cold, they're tadpoles for 4 years. So completely different from what we have down here. But again, so amphibian double life, you're a tadpole, then you're a frog. And so that's what caused the demise of this particular species, and that and chytrid fungus, and we'll go into that too. Smooth, scaleless skin, permeable to water and gases. They don't actually drink it, they suck it up. They put their little bellies on wet things and suck up the water into their skin. Some of them breathe through their skin, especially some of the salamanders. And they're the ones that, I mean, they're basically an indicator species. They're the canary in the coal mines. If we start seeing dead amphibians everywhere here in the valley, we need to start going like, bad things are happening, don't drink the water. So we'll go through some of our salamanders that we have here. Salamanders, elongated trunks. Most of them have 4 legs. You do have an aquatic and a terrestrial species, but not all of them go through that. Some of them stay in. And so, how many of y'all have been to like these weird like fish hatcheries or these weird like gas stations that sell mud puppies and you can fish with them? I grew up like in the Huntsville area, and so we used to go and get tubs and you could get mud puppies. And they weren't mud puppies. They were actually the aquatics of your tiger salamanders. So some of them do go through a full aquatic lifestyle and stay there. And for whatever reason, they don't actually go through metamorphosis, they stay in that. And they call them mud puppies, but that's not a true mud puppy. We only have 2 in the state. So the ones that we have down here, very important. Here is our siren. Do y'all do field trips to Southmost Preserve? Have you been to see Max Ponds at the Southmost Preserve? Okay. If you go down there, he's funny because, he's funny. Love Max. I've worked with Max for forever. But the Southmost Preserve is a nature conservancy property that we have. It's next to Sable Palms. And so this weird, it's a really gorgeous preserve. But then they have these, it's like, what do you call it? Like where the trucks back up and then they make these like it's like I don't know how to describe it. It's like an area where like big 18-wheelers back up and they load on loading docks. So he has loading dock ponds that for whatever reason are full of these guys. So if you ever go to the Southmost Preserve, he has the loading dock ponds next to his big area, and we have the Rio Grande lesser siren, which is a protected species. Kind of cool, slimy species. And then this guy. Okay, so I'm excited about this one. I have never seen one until this year. I'm so excited. I work for state parks, I work for Texas Park and Wildlife. So we have a lot of research that's being done, like at Restaca, that's being done at Benson, Stero, to see if we have these through UTRGV. One of my friends from my PhD, he is now back at UTRGV, Drew Davis. He's now doing his postdoc at UTRGV. And he is working on a black-spotted newt, but at Palo Alto Battlefield. They have a pond that they have these, you just put down pieces, they're called cover boards. You just put cover boards down and they kind of sit on the ground and they're kind of a little above the water, and then you lift them up and then they, for some reason, get under these cover boards. So this is a federally endangered species that we do have here in the valley. I finally have my photo with 2 of them. I'm like holding them, they're super cute. But we're hoping to find them. They're at Laguna Atascosa. You can see them. They have them in a display case, but they have them there. We do have them at Benson. and other state parks. But it's just not a common species that you're just gonna go walk and find. This is one that you actually have to kind of like track and look for. But it's one of our salamanders. And then this is probably the most common. Again, like I said, if you ever go to like a bait shop and they say that they have water dogs, you're probably seeing the neotenic species, or the neotenic version of the tiger salamander. And these guys are big. They're like this big. Where I usually find most of them is in West Texas. After like a huge rain, you're gonna see them on the road. And like I said, they're giant and they're super cute. Look at that face. I mean, salamanders are just. And I did a lot of work with them, and here's Bastrop County. I did a lot of work with them in Bastrop County as well. We trapped quite a few. I think they're probably found statewide. So, what you're gonna find with these maps, you've got all the different counties of Texas. You have what's called a county record. So a lot of herpetologists try to get published. And the easiest publication is to find either a live on road or a DOR, a dead on road species that is not found in one of these counties that is kind of like listed here. And this is through Dixon, Dr. Dixon. He is the father of herpetology. So a lot of the herpetologists will try to publish things. So that's why you can kind of see it's like sparse. But if you have them down here, I'm pretty sure they're all in here. But nobody has published that. So that's kind of one of those.
What's the different colors for?
I think what they did here was in different years. So these were kind of like newer records that they put like just recent records. So now we're gonna go to my babies. Oh, our Houston toad. Frogs and toads, 4,700 species, the hugest group of amphibians. Without a tail, they do have a tail when they're, in their aquatic lifestyle. Short bodies, large heads, and then you have weird reproductive. When I used to teach at a middle school, what is it called? The pippa frog. It's not in the United States. She lays her eggs in her back, and then all of a sudden, her back hatches, and then all the babies come out of the back, and you can see the legs coming out of. It's like the grossest thing. It's
So they hatch as little frogs instead of tadpoles?
out of yes. So they're tadpoles in her back, and then they hatch out as full-grown frogs. Oh, it's the grossest thing. If I can hook up to the internet, I'll show you the video. And then they do the music too. Dun, 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 dun. Gross. Okay, so here we don't have disgusting hatchings. There's called the gastric brooding frog, where she takes in her tadpoles into her stomach, and then they develop, and then she kind of basically regurgitates her babies. None of that happens here in the United States. Everything is usually in the water, tadpole becomes a frog. Not disgusting. Here is one of those that I have yet. How many of y'all have ever seen these or heard of them? See, nobody, and I haven't either. Okay, so this is one of my lifers that I have got to get. Star and zapata. If we get, and it's about the time. So let's say it becomes March and we get 2 to 3 to 5 inches of rain. Race to Star County and see if you can hear these guys. So they spend the majority of their life underground, and they build these kind of little cocoons where they're submerged in their saliva and kind of gross. And you can tell they're not a normal looking frog. I mean, they're little. But they emerge and they have these mass breeding periods when we get enough rain. And sometimes it doesn't happen every year. So they can go different years where they're not actually breeding. It just depends on the amount of rain. But this is a threatened species. And you can only find them in the Star and Zapata counties. I don't exactly know where. I just heard like when you get rain, go that way. Haven't figured it out yet. But some other ones that we have, which is some of my favorites. I can tell you some stories about these guys. Okay, so spadefoot toads, you can tell them, look at their eyes. Gorgeous. Huge, huge eyes. Again, just like these guys, they have these breeding periods where if you don't get rain, they're not going to come out and they're not going to breed. They're going to be underground. You're not going to see them. But we have 3 different kinds in Texas, and the ones that you're going to see the majority of are going to be these 2 species right here. I have a great story about couches. We were out in West Texas, and again, it was like a pouring down rain. We're driving around. My advisor's like, look, here's a Whataburger cup. Go put them in the cup. Because I worked with a geneticist, so we always like cut their toes off. It sounds terrible. And did genetic research on their toes. So, you know, I was like having to like scramble and like grab a whole bunch of spadefoot toes. So I have them in this Whataburger cup. And so I'm sitting here in this truck at night, and we're probably like close to Big Bend area. And then I go like this.
Oh.
Do that.
Their skin has these toxins.
They have what?
Toxins
Oh.
on their skin. And it burns. And it makes you like snot and saliva. And so for the next 2 hours, my eyes were watering, my nose was just running, I could not breathe. It was burning, my whole face was burning. And I'm holding this cup of spadefoot toads in a Whataburger cup. Thank you, advisor. If you ever went to grad school, you understand that. But they're called spadefoots. If you ever see the back, so they're really strong burrowers. And they have what's called a spade on the back of their foot. And the way I used to learn it was, I'm a little spade foot, short and stout. Or no, I'm a little scaffy, short and stout. Here is my spade foot. Here. And then I stopped the song. But we used to have to learn the genus and species of these. And so we had to learn like little songs and dance. That was my song and dance. But they have, and I don't have a really good photo, but they have these black, it's a black spade. And so they are very, very good diggers. And so they dig, and that's where they spend most of their time is underground until you have these huge rain events. And so we do get all 3 species here in the valley. Most common will probably be the couches and the herterize. Chirping frogs. So these guys are hard to find because they sound just like the Mediterranean gecko. So if anybody lives in town, I live in Harlingen, just like 2 streets over, in an apartment complex, and I hear at night, I don't know if it's this guy or if it's the Mediterranean gecko, because the geckos also chirp. But these are the Rio Grande chirping frogs, and they're also kind of a protected species. And then we have a different species up north, but we have this subspecies that's here down south. And so it's super, super, super teeny tiny, and it just at night, and that's what you're gonna hear. This is another individual I have never seen. Mexican white-lipped frog that we do have down here. I actually do not even know what it sounds like. But this is a species that we can find only here in Cameron, Hidalgo, and Zapata, or is that Star County? Yeah. So it's another species that a lot of herpetologists, as soon as it rains, they go out, and we're getting ready to be in that period of time. Like it is going to be amphibian central. It probably already is, because we hit 80 degrees. Like I was in California when we were at 50, but y'all hit like 92 or something last Friday. So the amphibians are out. It's amphibian time. And then another one that we do have down here, it's a larger frog, the Mexican tree frog. I've seen this guy actually in the Caribbean, not in Texas. I know. It's still cool, but a larger individual. It's related, yeah, to the gray tree frog and the green tree frog that we do have down here. Okay, one of my favorites Oh, yes, Mr. Jared,
Question.
yes,
So when you go out, you say they're out there,
they're out there.
okay? Like it rained today.
Uh-huh.
Where do we go look?
Good question, because I don't know, because I haven't seen them, like, it's
Well, I mean, any frog.
Well,
You just walk around a pond and look for them? I mean,
so when I heard Starr County, and I've been down in the valley for 3 years, I'm not from here, I don't exactly know where to drive. And Texas, everybody has a gun. I'm not keen on just kind of like,
it's to
approaching.
shoot frogs.
Right. What?
It's to shoot frogs.
Shoot frogs, yes. So that's the reason why I haven't ventured out, because I haven't figured out where I can go safely without being like shot.
But what I mean is, like, if we went to Resaca de la Palma or Estero,
Uh-huh.
okay, yeah, you walk around and there's water, we would think that's where the frog is,
You
but
can
not
hear them.
necessarily, per se. Where do you go look for them when you're looking for the thing?
So for a lot of these, yes, Resaca would be a good place because of the water. But like for the ones that are the burrowing toads and the spadefoot toads, they're not necessarily sitting next to a Resaca. You're gonna find them way upland, completely away from water, because they've dug their own burrow and they're just waiting for the rain to come up. So not all amphibians need to be next to the water. They go back to reproduce, but a lot of them will reproduce, like especially the Mexican burrowing and the spadefoots in ephemeral ponds. Because again, we live in a place that, right, we're super hot. So if we get 6 inches of rain, you're gonna have these ponds, or you're gonna have these pools that might hold water for 16, 20 days. That is enough time for these tadpoles to metamorphose and then migrate out of the ponds. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. So you don't have to have a huge body of water to find them. So it could be
anywhere.
It could be anywhere. Especially like, remember when we had that, what was it, June of last year, when we had those 12 inches of rain? Oh man, I heard reports of the Mexican burrowing frogs coming out everywhere, under underpasses, all kinds of things, because that water was there. They knew how to get to it. It was boom, boom, and that's all they do, and then they go back underground.
I think one of the key things is to become familiar with their sounds, because
Yes.
when it rains, you could hear them,
Mhm.
and just following that sound that they make, you're gonna see the frog.
Yep. So, and it's the males that make the calls, and so that's the easiest way to find them in the spring, because that's when they reproduce, and the males are gonna be called. So you can find the males that way, yes. Females do not call, but in the spring, you can find them that way. And that's how we found our Houston toads. Oh my gosh, my favorite. Okay, cane toads, that's a bad word for a lot of places. They are native here. So it is not a bad word for South Texas. Everyone, you're gonna hear Australia, they're covered in cane toads, they are. They introduced that species for a biological fix of some other species, and it didn't work. They didn't eat what they wanted it to eat, and so they take over. We have the cane toads here. They are native. They are amazing. So I've seen them at Estero. I've never seen them here in Cameron County. I've seen them in Hidalgo. These are two that I got from Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park. It was like a little water feature, and they were just like the size of my head.
Do they burrow as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but they're gigantic. So people are like, don't touch them, don't touch them. Toads, they have parotid glands, and so those are their poison sacs, and they're on the back of their head. It's not like the spadefoots that's all over their skin. So that they can eject a poison from that. And so you don't want to lick them, even though there is a toad that people do lick in Texas, and it's euphoric. The poor Texas toad. I feel bad for him.
And these are big?
These are the size of my head.
I've seen some in my backyard too.
So,
But Willacy County's not on there.
I think they're in Willacy County. Again, this is published by
They're cute.
Herptologists publishing where they found it, not saying necessarily if they're not found
Okay,
there.
so I'll take a picture and send it to you.
Oh, they didn't publish it, yeah. They're I mean, they're gigantic.
Yes.
They're huge. And then, oh, yeah. Oh, so I was getting my nails done the other day. Oh, no, well, okay, not the other day. Like a year ago. But here in town. And this movie was on, and I didn't realize that this movie even existed. But what it is, it's about, there's some like famous people. Sam Elliott, there you go, and yeah. They're on this island, and the island is full of cane toads and like snakes, of course, and all the snakes hiss, even though snakes don't really hiss. But yeah, they're all like, everybody on the island and that ends up being eaten by the toads and stuff. Hilarious. But it's all like cane toads and like rat snakes, but I thought it was funny. So if y'all ever want to see like a B- movie. So just like the Mexican burrowing, this is another one you're not going to see. I mean, you can actually take even a look at their faces. You know that they're a burrowing type of amphibian. They live most of the time underground. This is going to be another one. You're only going to find it during the breeding season, and you're going to hear it. You're going to hear the males call. And that's the only way, otherwise they're going to be underground the rest of the year. And so that's our sheep frog. And again, one I have never seen before.
Do they tend to come out at night, the frogs?
Yes.
Oh.
So most amphibians are nocturnal. You'll hear like cricket frogs, you'll hear leopard frogs, you'll hear bullfrogs. You'll hear those during the day. But for the most part, most amphibians are going to be nocturnal. And so now we're getting into our awesome reptiles that we have down here. And people, just like the birds, people come down here for the reptiles. Not so much for the amphibians, but definitely for the reptiles. Because we have some special ones down here. And my favorite, the Texas tortoise, which you can find probably maybe like an 8. I think San Antonio is the max of where you can find them, and then down from those counties. So like Bexar County and then down. But your reptiles, completely different from amphibians. Dry, scaly skin, they don't actually absorb, well, I guess some do. These guys absorb water through their skin. But you have dry, scaly skin. You have different types of eggs and different hearts. And the eggs of Texas tortoises are weird. And I'll talk to y'all when we get to that one. So when we talk about our reptiles, we're talking about lizards and snakes, which snakes are my favorite. Again, I go running and everybody else goes running the opposite direction. I work at Resaca de la Palma State Park, and so every now and then we get a snake in our bathroom. And so we have like school groups come in, and they come in and all of a sudden everybody screams. And so I know there's a snake in the bathroom. And so I get to go take it out. And the other day we had a coral snake eating a baby rat snake, and then we found another dead rat snake next to it. So after it was finished eating the one baby rat snake, we tossed it the second baby dead rat snake, and it ate 2. It was so cool.
Snake, they're little tiny.
Oh, I know, and this was the biggest coral snake I've ever seen. I mean, it was probably 3 foot, but I mean, by the time that one was done eating those 2 rat snakes, oh, he was super fat. And with our snakes, they reproduce in completely different ways. Usually, your well, we don't have copperheads down here, but your diamondback rattlesnakes and stuff, they're gonna have live birth. And then you have others that actually have eggs, and then you have others that have eggs, and then when they give birth, then they give birth to normal critters. So they have birth all different ways. And then we'll talk about some lizards that we have, especially down here at the Laredoensis. Yeah, they're all females. They're pediomorphic, and so they don't even need males. They're like, we don't need that. Just do it on our own. So the special ones that we do have here, this is a state threatened species, teeny tiny snake. We have them. You can find them in this county. Just flip over some logs, dead logs or rotten logs. You're gonna find these guys under here. They're fairly common for us, but they're a state threatened species, completely harmless. But a neat little tiny. They don't get any bigger than about this big. But my favorite. Yes, the indigo, and everyone's like the blue indigo. Okay, that's redundant. Indigo snake, it is blue, okay, get it? I have like arguments with my friends. The blue indigo, no, you're saying blue. If you're saying blue purple, whatever, stop. Very, very large snake, very common. You go to Resaca de la Palma State Park, we have a whole bunch of them, very large. Why do we not see rattlesnakes? Because these guys, it's their primary food source. They'll eat other types of snakes, but rattlesnakes is their big one. And so they get big. They're not a constrictor, however, even though they're large. And they're typically, I say this, they're typically docile. So if you see, you'll see a 5-footer, a 6-footer, and sometimes they'll be. I get a little weirded out when I have to go up to those big ones, but you can pick them up, even though they're threatened. You shouldn't, but you can. And they're docile. They're not a huge aggressive snake. But if they were to turn around and bite you, they're not a constrictor. They crush. So just think about that. They're gonna swing around and bite you and crush you. I've never been bit. Tony, however, was bit by a little Tony Hinahan was bit by a little tiny 3-footer, and I died laughing. I was like,
So you can't actually get hurt, they won't hurt you? They're crushing.
I've picked up quite a bit of big ones, and they never have, but I'm very nervous with them.
But then you hold them.
Yeah. I've never had one be aggressive. They're, like I said, they're considered a docile snake, but if they were to bite, they're not a constrictor. They're gonna crush. They're
What
gonna
did
be like,
they do to Tony?
it just bit him. And I mean, it was a little guy, so I was just like, ha ha. He's like, no, these guys don't bite, and he picks it up and it swings around all the way.
So how did they manage the rattlesnake, killing the rattlesnake?
So I think they have, I think they're like possums, and they have immunity to the venom.
Okay.
And so they can eat them, yeah.
Yeah, that's why.
Because possums are the same way, yeah.
Mm.
They have immunity to the venom. And you can find them pretty far up in Texas, but I really have only seen a whole bunch of them just down in here.
We
They're
have
probably
quite a
most-
few
They're
here
probably
in
one of the
Harley.
most common snakes you're gonna find if you
Yeah.
go to any of our state parks, if you go to Laguna Ascosa, Hugh Ramsey, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's gonna be your, oh, they're so pretty. This guy, I've seen one. I finally got him. Okay, so excited. The only place I think you can find them is at Southmost Nature Conservancy with Max Ponds. You gotta go to visit Crazy Max. And it's a speckle racer. They're gorgeous and they're threatened. It was 2004. I was on a herpetology trip. I hadn't even bought on to I wanted to be a herpetologist. I was just in this class. And my advisor, he saw the snake go into this whole pile of pallets at Max's place. And so we all surrounded the pallets and we just start tearing the pallets around. And all I remember is my advisor saying you can't lose that snake. You will all fail. You can't lose that snake. Can we find the snake, please? And we finally did. We got to the bottom of the pallets and we caught it. But it's a very elusive snake that we have here. And Cameron County is pretty much the only county that you're going to see them. We do have them in Hidalgo, but where everybody says that they've seen them has been the Nature Conservancy or Sable Palms. Those are the two places. So,
They're not poisonous.
no. And so this is another species I haven't seen actually down here, but I'm very familiar with hognose, especially in central Texas. But we do have hognose, and hognose are interesting. They are venomous, but they're rear fanged, and so they're not venomous in the way it would put you in the hospital, like a diamondback rattlesnake or anything like that. They eat basically like crayfish, small fish, larger invertebrates, but they are rear fanged and they do have some venom. They're cute because they have those little, you can't see it there, where they have this little, they have a pig nose. They're called hog noses. They're so
There you
cute.
go.
And they are dramatic. You want to talk about the drama queen of reptiles? You go and pick them up, they're going to be like, oh, I'm dying. And they're going to flip over and they're going to throw their tongue out. And they're going to like lash around and they're just be like, I'm dying, I can't believe it. And they're going to throw poop everywhere. And then they're just going to lay there. And you're going to be like, oh, I killed it. That's what they want you to think. But no, they're fine. So, they play possum. And again, this is another species that I've never seen bite anybody. They're not super aggressive. They go through their like flailing, I'm dying, and then they are like, oh, okay, you're not gonna eat me, I'm over it. And then they flip back over. But cool, very cool species. Again, another one I have not seen, Southmost Preserve, sable palms. This is where you need to go if you want to see this snake. Nighttime. So this is the cat-eyed snake. So this is a nocturnal snake. So you would want to go at night and try to look through the trees for this guy. But again, state threatened. This is one. So a lot of times they tell you if it has vertical pupils, it's dangerous or it's venomous. In the United States, that's a pretty good rule. We can go by that. That's your rattlesnake, that's your copperheads, that's your cottonmouths. Well, it's not your coral snakes because that's in the lapid. That's different. But for the United States, that's a pretty good rule. Don't do that if you go to like Thailand or Africa or whatever, because all of their snakes have vertical pupils, and they're all like harmless or deadly. Everything's deadly in other like. The United States has very few deadly snakes, which is good. You don't have to worry. But this is called the cat-eyed snake. You can see the pupils there. It's got that vertical pupil, but completely harmless. So we actually only have two venomous that you have to worry about here in the valley, and that's the western diamondback rattlesnake, and that's the coral snake. So this is one that's fairly common, and sadly I see this one dead on the highway most often. It's the Ruthvine's whip snake. We also have the regular Masticophis shot-eye, but the Ruthvine has a little more green to its color. Very fast snake. Again, you can see kind of where it is. So here's where the Ruthvine is, and here's where the regular Masticophis shot-eye is. So it's a completely different subspecies that we have down here. Very pretty snake. Very common in rural areas. So you might see this if you live in an apartment complex. You might see this snake around.
Is that more like what you call like the green snake or the garden snake, the little one?
It could be. We have the rough green around, but I think a lot of people call this like the garden snake because I see this more at my apartment complex than I see the rough green snake. Yeah. Oh, my water snakes. Love them. They're so mean. They're so Mr. Pissy Pants. Love water snakes. A lot of people have like a little love-hate with water snakes because they see this and they go cottonmouth, harmless. We don't have cottonmouths down here in the valley. So this is a very harmless snake. Again, the cottonmouth is going to have the vertical pupil, and I just know snakes really well. But the mouth, I mean, he's just smiling. He's just like, okay, I'm a cute water snake. But this is going to be the most common one that we see down here. They are very bitey. They will flail out their head to make themselves look venomous. And if you do catch them, they're in a lapid or I just lost my word. But if you were to grab them, the first thing that they do, well, first of all, they bite. They're very bitey. They'll swing around, bite. They have an anticoagulant in their saliva. So if you ever get bit by one, you think you're like bleeding to death. You're not. It's fine. You're just bleeding. I know, I used to send my mom photos. Look, she's like, oh my God. Because we used to do, I was with Dr. Dixon, and we used to do a whole bunch of neurodia work in this part of Texas. And so we were catching 40 a day, and I was just grabbing them from the water. I was just, yeah. and they swing around and they bite. And then as soon as they swing around and bite, then they throw their cloaca on you, and they just rub it. They're colubrid, there we go. So they stink. That's their defense mechanism, is I'm gonna rub my stinky stuff all over your body, and you're gonna smell for days, and you can't wash it off, and baby wipes does not work. So yeah, there were a couple of weeks in Texas where I just stunk. I was like, no, I don't wanna be near me. But because of these guys, they're stinky, but they're awesome. They eat fish. I don't know why I like them so much. I think because they're so numerous, and you see them everywhere. But again, not venomous, not gonna hurt you. I mean, they'll bite, they hurt. But the most common, they stink. Oh, you will smell for days. The most common snake you're gonna find is gonna be this guy, the Gulf Coast ribbon. And you'll see him in the water, and this will actually be really vibrant orange. So if you ever go to Estero and you go see their little pond in the back, they're gonna be there. Resaca has them. Every time I see it, I go to the Resaca, I see one. This is the most common snake that I have found in the Rio Grande Valley. Harmless, completely harmless. Maybe get to 4 feet. They're not a big snake, they're skinny, and they're fish eaters. So these guys you'll see in the water quite a bit. And then, oh my gosh, the one that we saw eating the rat snakes. So this is one of the 2 of the venomous that we have here, and this is the Texas coral snake. Recently, I would say in the past 10 years, they stopped making anti-venom for this snake because it's so rare that people actually get bit by them. You'll hear, oh, well, they're rear fangs, so they have to chew on you. That's not true. I mean, they can bite you. I mean, you grab it, it'll swing around, bite you, you're done. I would recommend you not get bitten by these guys. They're fossorial, so you'll find them like if you like dig through like leaf litter, that's kind of where we tend to find them. They're not gonna necessarily be, you know, just out on the road kind of sunning themselves sometimes. Teeny tiny heads, very gorgeous snake. You can do the whole red and yellow, kill a fellow, red on black, friend of Jack type deal, but I've also seen some coral snakes that are polka dotted. So it just really depends. There's some weird ones. But these guys, highly venomous, don't get bit by them. Twitchy, they are a very twitchy snake. I was most nervous having to deal with these snakes because as soon as you put them with snake tongs, they just lose their mind. And just, don't like them. Oh, and then one of my favorites. How many of y'all been to Palo Alto Battlefield? Have y'all seen the rattlesnakes there? Oh my God. Palo Alto Battlefield has the largest and the most diamondback rattlesnakes that I have ever seen. I do Texas tortoise surveys out there. And there was one day, and it was just like everybody on the radio was like, rattlesnake, rattlesnake. It was like 14 rattlesnakes within like 2 hours. And they're like 5 foot and bigger. They're huge. Again, Resaca, we have a lot of indigo snakes, so we don't see a lot of the rattlesnakes. But these guys, especially in this area, I mean, they're all over the United States, but in this area, the coastal rattlesnakes are big. They get really, really big. So be careful, because that's our second venomous, but gorgeous, gorgeous snake. And then we have our weird lizards down here. Okay, so this is gonna be the one that goes, oh wait, that's the Texas bandit, never mind, that's not the Mediterranean. This is the one that is native. So we have a native gecko and we have a non-native gecko. This guy is native. I've never seen one here in Cameron or Hidalgo. Very common in Big Bend. And this is our Texas bandit, Oleonyx brevis. And he has the banded tail. And they're a nocturnal lizard. So they don't have the thick scales, they come out at night. Again, they have the slit eye, so they use that for nighttime vision. This is another one that's very awesome. This is one of my favorites. We don't have them in Cameron. I still haven't seen them in Hidalgo, and I haven't been up to Star, but I've seen them in these areas. The reticulated collar. So you're talking about a lizard, it's about this big. And its head is about this big. Very awesome lizard. Oops. What was that? So Texas horn lizard is one everybody is usually familiar with. And look at where it's found. I know a ton of people who have never seen this guy. How many of y'all have never seen a Texas horn lizard? I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, because the only reason why I have seen them is because I went looking, trying to find them. Apparently back in like the 60s and 70s, it was like the cool pet to have, and so everybody would collect them. And that kind of led to their demise. The other thing that has really led to their demise is that they eat harvester ants. And harvester ants have now been displaced by red imported fire ants. So where you have a lot of red imported fire ants, you don't see harvesters, and then you don't see these guys. Because they don't eat the fire ants, they only eat the harvester ants. And so their food source is basically going away. So the only one I've ever seen was in Cotulla, which is about right in here. And sadly, Palo Alto, I've heard you can find some of them. These guys are very cool because their defense mechanism, besides the fact that they have spikes all over their body, is they can shoot blood out their eye. Which I've never seen happen, but that's pretty cool. I mean, that would make me drop. And if I was a raccoon or something, I'd be like, ugh. So that's pretty cool. Okay, this guy, if you want to see the blue spiny lizards, Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park. They have a area within the park where it's like where they have picnic tables and they have like a pavilion. 10 o'clock in the morning, you need to go to that spot. The whole entire wall of the pavilion is covered with the blue spinies. And it's the only place that I've been able to see the blue spinies is in Hidalgo. I haven't seen them in Cameron County, but Benson Rio Grande State Park. And they are blue. They're very large lizards, and you can tell by their collar. So all the Scoloporus have these spines. And they're pretty easy to catch if you have we used to use fishing poles, and we had nooses, and you'd stick it around their neck, and then you'd yank, and then you'd have someone that goes there to grab, because it would get under their scales. Yeah, they're very, this picture doesn't do this guy's justice, but they're very, very brilliant blue. And then the one that you're gonna see the most, besides the anoles, again, if you live in town, you're gonna see the green anole, which is native, and you're gonna see the brown anole, which is non-native. Those are gonna be your two most common lizards that you're gonna see in town. But if you're at any park or walking around, this is gonna be the usual suspect, the Texas spiny lizard. It's not blue, it's not brilliant, it's not gigantic, I mean, I like him. I'm not saying I don't like him. I'm just saying he's not blue. He's probably about this big. And this is gonna be your most common lizard that you're gonna see in town, besides the anoles. And then here are your two anoles. Again, like I said, I live at the Sierra Apartments, like 2 streets over. And I see these guys, these are the native, and they're actually being out-compete. So you're gonna see a lot more brown anoles down here. Then you're gonna see the green anoles. And you can see kind of how sparse. And so the brown anoles, just like a lot of the species, have come over with plants being imported into the United States. So these guys like to get on my screens in my apartment complex, and then I come home and my blinds are completely shredded because my cat sees the anole on the screen on the outside. He's like, I can get that, and then he shreds me. And then we also have what's called a skink, which looks a lot like a salamander, but it's considered a lizard. They don't require the aquatic part. Most salamanders need to be near water. These guys don't. The little brown skink is going to be your common leaf litter. If you would turn up leaf litter, that's where you're going to find this little guy. So here are the whiptails. So besides the anoles, these are gonna be the other common lizard that you're gonna see. If you go to Resaca, you're gonna see them everywhere on the sidewalks. Okay, so they're interesting, and you have to actually catch them to figure out which one they are. Because we have Galeris, which has 7 stripes. We have Sex lineatus, which has 6 stripes. And Galeris actually has spots in between his stripes. And then you have Laredoensis, which is pretty neat, because again, so these two guys can interbreed and create a cadiomorphic species that does not need to breed with a male. They are asexual. Yeah, and there's other well, they're not Nematophorus anymore. They're here, Speedo. I still stick with the ones. I don't agree with a lot of the changes that they do. So I still call them Nematophorus, but here's the Speedocoelus. There's other species that are like in Arizona, New Mexico that are also cadiomorphic, so they don't require males, they're asexual. But the one that we have here, and we currently have studies going on in Benson Rio Grande Valley about this species. So it's pretty interesting, because they're trying to decide if it's one species, or when these two breed, they actually can breed 2 different species. So that's the research that's going on right now. Dr. Cortez, I've been working with him. But you'll see these very common. And they're fast. They're very fast lizards. And then one that I don't ever see, I think the only time I've ever found one was in North Carolina, is our glass lizard, or what people call the legless snake. Yeah, it's not a snake at all. It has all the forms of the lizard. It's not a snake. It just, in evolution, which we can't use that word. Yeah, it just decided to lose its legs. So, yeah, when we talk about evolution, it's easier to lose things than to gain things. So a lot of times you're gonna see that there are features that are lost to enable animals to function versus gaining things. So for the legless lizards, they've lost their legs through time. And they're super cool. I've not seen very many of these guys at all. And then we have our turtles that we have down here. We've got quite a few, but you're not gonna see a lot of them. The ones that you're gonna see most common is gonna be the red-eared slider, which is actually a non-native species. But you have the mud turtle. It spends most of its time in the mud. So it's in the water. You're not gonna see it. You can actually tell the difference between, there's a scoop back here you can count, and you know it's this guy versus a different species. But they're a mud turtle that we have. The Rio Grande cooter, Pseudomys grisei, there's a lot of studies being done on this guy. So it runs from Colorado, so the Rio Grande runs from Colorado down. And so this species has to be, it's only found in the Rio Grande River. And so there's a lot of work being done, Devil's River area on this species. They say we have it down here, it's been seen, but because of all of the dams that we have with all the different lakes and stuff, it's typically not found down here. You'd have to go up to Devil's River and stuff, and then Big Bend it's found. Gorgeous turtle, very threatened, so it's one that there's a lot of work that's being done on this guy. And it is a Pseudomys version. And then we do have the ornate box turtle. I don't think we have the 3-toed down here, but the ornate, and again, it's another species that I don't see down here at all. But there we have records for it. The majority of where I find it is out here in West Texas. So, but again, this is one that's not an aquatic turtle. And you can tell it doesn't have the webbed feet. So yeah, that's a terrestrial tortoise. And then my Texas tortoise. So again, from San Antonio basically down are these guys. It's state threatened. You'll see them sometimes DORs, which is sad, dead on road. Large, very large tortoise. The difference between this species and ones that you find in like North Carolina, South Carolina, and in Arizona, is they're not a burrowing tortoise. They make what's called a pallet. So they'll find some cactus and they'll just go, well, I'm just gonna shove my face up under this cactus and I'm gonna have my butt sticking out for the whole winter. But that's okay, because we just don't have the harsh winters that other places do. So they actually do not burrow. They'll use the pack rat nests and they'll burrow in there. And there's a lot of times where you'll see the pack rat with the western, or you'll see the Texas tortoise and he's palleted up, and there's the western diamondback rattlesnake right next to him, and they're both under that pack rat nest. You gotta be careful when you're surveying for these guys. Another one you have down here, you'll see at Estero, is gonna be your spiny softshell. And they have little pig noses, and when they bite, they hurt. I've been bitten by one. And they're called soft shell. If you can take a look, you can tell that their shell is not hardened. Like the other tortoises. So they have the webbed feet. So these guys are highly aquatic. And so this is one of the turtles that we studied. There was a study done at Texas State University from 2010 to 2015 that now regulates harvest on these individuals. And it was that study because these guys used to be harvested like crazy down here in the valley. And so our whole study was, how many turtles can you harvest before we don't have a sustainable population anymore? Because Texas didn't have any regulatory laws on harvesting native turtles. And so now that changed just in 2018, the laws that came out. So that's pretty cool. And then my favorite. So I actually work for, I volunteer for Sea Turtle Inc. I'm one of their ATV riders. So every spring, we're gonna start in March. From spring to July, we ride ATVs. We leave Sea Turtle Inc., which is at South Padre Island, and we go 32 miles up and we hit Port Mansfield Cut and then turn around and come back. So we go 64 miles for the day. And what we're doing is we're looking for nesting mamas. I got my first mama last year. So excited. And so this is the Kim's Ridley. So you're gonna see them, they nest anywhere from Galveston south down into Mexico. And that's the only place that these guys nest. And so critically endangered species, it's really awesome. If you ever can get to a release, Google Sea Turtle Inc. will do egg release or nest releases. Because what happens when we find a nesting mama, then Sea Turtle Inc. comes and they harvest the eggs. And then they put them in an area where they can watch the eggs. And they can do the temperature, because eggs, the sexes of the turtles are dependent on temperature. So they try to do 50-50. So they have females, well, I think they actually know. I think they do more females than males. But they can do that, and so then they put the eggs in an area where they can watch them. And then as soon as they hatch, then they do these releases, these public releases at South Padre Island. So you have to get on their Facebook page and like them, and then you can go and actually watch them release the little baby turtles. So cute. And then we do have a few, we don't have crocodiles in Texas, but we do have the American alligator, which is a success story because this is one that used to be threatened. Everybody over-harvested. We were gonna lose all of our alligators in the state or even across the United States. And so this is one of the first, not mark recapture, but like, taking the eggs and releasing them. And it was a success story for the alligator. So we do have a really good population now. As a matter of fact, we have hunting seasons for them. You have to have a permit to hunt them, but you can get a permit to hunt them. We do have them. Laguna Atascosa, I would say, is the best place. Estero Llano Grande also has some alligators. They're not supposed to be there, but they've been there for years. So you can see them there. But the American alligator, awesome species, success story, because it went from, we had almost none, and now we can actually have a harvest. So here's some of the stuff that I did. Again, I was working in Bastrop, so I don't know if anybody know where Bastrop is. It's not too far from here, about 6 hours north. And I was doing amphibian conservation, where we were taking Houston, so kind of like the American alligator. We were going out, we were listening to the frogs, and we could hear the toads call at night, we could hear the males. So you can actually walk up to a pond and you can find a male, and then the female would be right there. And so we know where the eggs were being laid, and then we would gather the eggs the next morning, and we would put them in these tanks. And then we would raise them until they hatched, and then we would release them. So it's called head starting. You're basically taking an amphibian from its state where it's an egg and everything can eat it, and you're raising it to an age where it kind of offsets a little bit of that mortality rate from when it's tiny. So that's what we were doing here. So here I'm putting in eggs. And then we were also doing captive propagation, where the Houston Zoo was actually breeding Houston toads. They have what's called the assurance colony for us. And so they have over 600 adults from a whole bunch of different counties. So the genetics all work. They're not inbred. And so we have the eggs there, and we were releasing them in Bastrop County, and we were putting them. I developed this kind of mechanism to keep the eggs safe until they hatched into tadpoles, and just again to offset. So we've been doing this since 2010. My dissertation work was on this. It showed absolutely nothing worked. Of course, I went through 5 years and it was like, nothing worked. This is fantastic. No publishing. And this actually burned when the Bastrop fires. I lost all of my stuff. But what we have just learned in 2018 is that now, so I was doing genetic research too with the eggs, and what we were doing is we were taking individuals we found in the wild, and we were comparing their genetics to ones that we had released. But since I was there during the fire, we weren't finding many individuals anymore. We thought the population it was gone. We really thought we lost the Houston toad. But slowly the population started coming back in different areas, and Bastrop kind of expanding. And so what they started finding now is that we are finding individuals, the adults, that are related to the egg strands that we released. So my research wasn't successful, but my lab's research, who did it for 10 years after me, is successful. So I know, I was just like, wah, wah. But I can get excited because I'm the one who developed this, and that's what they're still using to protect the egg strands. And then we also looked at habitat. So we had adult Houston toads. You can see where the flags are. That's where the Houston toads were. We were just kind of looking like, what does an adult Houston toad do? It gets under a log, and it stays there for weeks, days. Some other research that I did, which was a lot of fun, was in California, which I just got back from. Mountain yellow-legged frog in the high Sierras. Again, in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s, they used to dump non-native trout into these lakes so fishermen could fish. Well, these lakes, they're not, trout aren't supposed to be there. They can't get there. They can't spawn. There's no spawning waters. So we had this frog, Rana muscosa, and it's now on the endangered species list because these were dropped into their lakes. And again, these stay tadpoles for 4 years. So they were just being feasted on because trout are they're carnivorous and they just eat everything. And so I spent, well, you're not supposed to electrofish that way. Like you're supposed to be standing, but that's the only photo I have of me with the electrofisher on because I usually was falling over with it. But we did electrofishing, and then we had gill nets, and we were trying to get rid of all the trout that were in these lakes so that we could do surveys on the frog and bring the frog population back. But the other issue that's happening in the Sierras is the chytrid fungus, and so that's killing a lot of the frogs. That's a whole other issue of like how it's being transported, where it's coming from, which species actually get affected by it. The chytrid fungus seems to have a certain temperature level that it likes versus others. Texas, all of our amphibians have chytrid fungus, but they don't die from it. So it's really weird. Here they do die from it. And then this was the work that I did that helped with the turtle population and the turtle regulations that we did. So we spent a lot of time on the Rio Grande. This is in Raymondville. spent a lot of time, doing turtles. This is when I got bit by the soft shell, because, it just happens.
They're super fast.
Well, what we did is I'm in the front and I'm the bait person, so I'm constantly like filling the bait here, and so that's all I do. And I just put my arm back like this. And Ivana, who's doing the work, she's the one who's taking the turtle out of the trap, and she's weighing it and measuring it. And then Donald's in the back, and he's like kind of steering. So what happened was I was putting my bait back like this, just kind of automatically doing it, and she pulled the turtle out and had it in her hand. And I was like, oh, I'm getting stung by something. And it was like, all of a sudden I hear her going, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. It's fine. I just got bit by a soft shell, that's fine. And again, we were looking at harvest impacts, and we found out that the harvesting that is done in South Texas is impacting the population. And so those laws have now been implemented in 2018, which is pretty cool.
What were they harvesting?
Mostly red-eared sliders, which is a non-native species, but we do have them now, and then the soft shell. And then we also did research on the snapping turtle.
But they were harvesting to eat, or?
Harvesting to eat, and then import and like ship to eat. Turtle is a delicacy everywhere. I know, I ate turtle soup when I was in Louisiana. I felt so guilty. And again, we're measuring and weighing them. I'm taking a blood sample. Just all fun stuff on the river. This is Mexico right here. Right here on this bank. We swam across a couple of times, And this is in Big Bend Ranch, and we're doing the bait stuff. And I told you a little bit about what I do with the sea turtle monitoring. I ride the ATV, and I'm looking for that. So, other stuff that I've done. So this is part of the Texas tortoise monitoring that I do with U.S. Fish and Wildlife at Palo Alto. This is Houston toad work. This was after the Bastrop fire. We had to rebuild everything. We lost all of our research. And so these are what are called perp arrays. They're built for amphibians, reptiles. They come, they hit this, and then they wander and they fall into a bucket. And then we check the buckets every day. And so that's how we kind of monitor. And then again, here's my Houston toad. And this was how I was monitoring the Houston toads that were underground. Because they just get under a log and sit there. And a stero, doing more turtle stuff. I like turtle stuff. Do I have that Indian side? But yeah, so that's kind of just a little bit about our amphibians and reptiles that we have here in the valley, and research involved in all of that. So, does anybody have any questions?
The red-eared slider, they're not native.
Not native.
They're all over.
All over.
But if you try to they sell them down in Progresso. If you try to bring one up here, they get very upset.
Yes.
Why?
Well, because they're still regulated, and I guess you try to bring even a grapefruit across, I feel like I get attacked. So I think it's just bringing the species across the border because it's a non-native species, but now it's considered kind of like it's non-native, but now it's considered not a habitual.
It's an adopted native.
Yeah, it's something like that. So now they're protected
Oh,
here.
okay.
Yeah. But I mean, just like the rest of the eastern United States, everybody I'm guilty. I had Tiki 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 in my fish tank, and then we put him in the backyard when he got too big for his tank. I'm guilty before I became a biologist. So that's where they came from. Everybody had them as pets. I mean, raise your hand if you had a red-eared slider as pets. See, hey, don't feel guilty. I had 6 of them. So, anybody else? Oh, yeah. Oh, so yeah. If we didn't put them in gill nets, so we got them with the electroshocker, we ate them. But the problem is that the canyon that we were working in, that was the one that had been worked on for 7 years. Our other 2, so there was 2 of us per canyon, so there were 6 total. So we had 2 other people in 2 other canyons that were brand new. So we only got 2 trout that whole year. Whereas they were eating trout the whole summer. It's like, why did we not get? But they had chytrid fungus too, though. So we had the frogs. We didn't have So chytrid fungus was killing frogs like crazy, and we would just have like dead frogs everywhere. So our canyon was safe, but we had no trout, so we ate 2 trout that time. They were eating trout all summer, but they had dead frogs everywhere. Trade off, maybe. Maybe. I don't know if I would eat trout if there was like a dead frog, like, you know, floating by it. So.
I have a lizard in my yard and it's about this big and it's kind of bluish,
Mhm.
blackish. What is that?
Does it have stripes or does it look really
It's
spiny?
fast. No, it's smooth and
Okay.
shiny, and when the light hits, it's kind of bluish.
So that probably sounds more like the whiptail.
But I don't think it has stripes.
Well, it depends because the stripes aren't necessarily super, you can't see them like, yeah. So I think it's probably this guy. My lizards. Because if it's, I mean, you would know if it's spiny because it's very obvious. So I think it's one of these guys. But when they're, especially in the mating season, the males get super blue. So you might just see the blue and not see the stripes. Yeah. Otherwise, if you're in town, it's gonna be one of these. They're not. The green and knoll can get blue looking depending on what it's sitting on. But I wouldn't call it blue. It's like
Do they get much bigger than that?
no, they're, yeah, the green and knolls are about this big. Yeah.
What about like a little bit more pinkish lizard, a little smaller?
So there is, I don't have this on there, there's the yellow-bellied spiny, or it's called the rose-bellied spiny.
Something.
Yeah, and it's got a
Pinkish.
pinkish belly, and it's got
Oh.
pink on the sides too. And it's related to this guy.
It's super like tiny.
It's small, so that one's not much bigger than this. And it's gonna have the pinkish.
Isn't that pretty common? Also
Yeah.
in the area?
I see them more so in Hidalgo County, but.
Sometimes I'll see them in the window, the netting.
And then again, the knolls, they'll throw out their goulard flaps, and then those get pink. And so you might see that too, that's what my cat loves to attack.
They almost look like that. I don't know, just,
Yeah, so the other one's gonna be kind of pinkish on the sides, and then under the
But
belly.
I meant like, it's like almost see-through-ish.
Oh, but it's not.
Mediterranean gecko.
It's like soft skin.
That's what it sounds
It's
like.
almost back, when you back up a couple of pictures.
No, yeah, they're almost
Well, we
see-through.
do,
Yeah.
I think we
it's
have a
weird.
couple of earless lizards that I see.
Looks like it's.
It kind of looks like that,
Like that, but they're
but big.
Oh, the
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so I didn't put the non-native species on here. Okay,
Oh.
so you have this one, which is the Texas, I didn't put the Mediterranean gecko, and that's gonna be the most common. You're gonna see it at night, and it's gonna be very fluorescent, it's gonna be very pink. It doesn't have the banded tail,
It looks like
and it's just
it's
pink.
everywhere.
All in it.
It
It
looks like
is,
those toys that's in.
yes, and so that's a non-native species that we have here, and that's the one that's gonna go at night, which sounds like the chirping frog. But that's gonna be very common. Yeah, if you go into your outdoor closet in your apartment or whatever, you're gonna open it, and
Yeah,
you're gonna
they're everywhere.
scatter them, yeah.
We have,
Yeah.
So I didn't put the non-natives up here, but yeah.
This one?
These are, yes, that's the Mediterranean. Yep,
oh yeah, they're everywhere.
and they're everywhere, yeah. Yeah, they like South Texas, it's nice and warm down here.
So the black slit-looking mode is not native, it looks like a nose.
They get the light,
Which
and
one's-
then they look
Well,
like
it's not up there, it's not,
transparent kind of,
it's
and that
black.
freaks me out.
Yeah, that's what you're
Like, it's not the
talking
fact that
about.
it's like a
It's
lizard,
solid
it's the
black,
fact that its body
and
is so
it's
soft,
slit,
and it
it's
looks so
shiny.
like see-through.
So it's gotta be not.
No, I think if you see something that's shiny and full black, I think you're thinking, you might be seeing this guy. Or a version of this skink.
It
It's a
looks
skink.
more like that,
Yeah,
what I'm talking about.
so,
But
yeah,
it's black and the light hits it and it looks kind of blue.
yeah.
It's all black, yeah.
So we do have different skinks down here. This is the most common that we have.
Oh, okay.
But there's others that get larger, and then there's some that when they're males, they have a blue tint and they have a blue tail that you'll see. But they're very shiny. They're
Yes.
very split.
And they could be dog color also?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like a brown, just
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah. And again, these are all just different photos. What I've learned most, and it's the same thing with other animals, depending on the county and the habitat they're in, they're gonna have different colorations. And so that makes them a little more difficult to identify. So like when I had to learn all these, I had to count scales. Because our advisory, would bring like dead animals out in like, formaldehyde. And they bleach the color, so you have no clue what they look like. So you have to count scales. But yeah, if you find this guy from down here, it's gonna look different from one up there, just because of the habitat difference. So,
And all the reporting is done by herpetologists specifically, or it has to be anybody?
it can be anybody, yeah, we just.
Is there a database that we report to, or is this?
I'm trying to think of the one, there isn't, you just have to look at so a lot of people look at Dixon, people look at Collins and Collins. You can look at the most recent. The problem is with that is like everything's like coming in. So I've even like put in for Mediterranean gecko in Bastrop County, and it got rejected because someone put it in a month before us. So it just depends on how all that works. But yeah, my advisor used to have us like, if it's raining, he's like, you guys should not be in your apartments. You need to go. You go to this county. You go to this county. You go to this county. And he just had us spread out, and we just were looking for DORs on rooms for county records. So I have 3 county records that way. So, and one was weird because I have a Western Diamondback for Lee County, which is next to Bastrop. It's somewhere right here. And of course, there's Western Diamondbacks there, but nobody. Again, it was one of those nobody cared to write it up. And we had a trash can full of Diamondbacks because someone was cleaning out their barn, and they were like, they had a nest of snakes. Yeah. So it's like a county record.
What about the little bitty Texas blind snake?
We have those Typhomoldi. Yeah, they're super cute. They look like little worms.
Yeah.
They get in your house. Yeah. So we do have those as well. I don't see them very often. The only time I ever actually find them is if I'm physically like lifting logs, looking for things, and I find them under there. And like I said, I've had them in my house before.
Yeah, I have them in my restroom. I find them every once in a while.
Yeah. And I didn't even have the Texas rat, or I didn't have the rat snake up here, which is another common one that you're gonna see. Yeah.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah. I kind of did more of like the threatened species, because we just have a plethora down here, so. But the rat snake is gonna be the coastal rat, I don't even know the common name anymore. But yeah, that's gonna be one that's pretty super common down here. And we have bull snakes as well.
There's one that has like, feels like it has like, in the tail, in the very tip of the tail, like a bone or something.
Well, the
That-
bull snakes and the rat snakes will both wag their tail, and then they will swing around and strike you with it to make you think that they're like biting you, yeah. Both those species will do that.
At one point in my life, we lived out in Bayview, and there was a housing complex there, and there was a black snake that would get into our trash cans, and I was told, leave them alone, because of course I was, leave them alone because they ate the rattlesnakes.
There's probably king snake then. We have king snakes in Texas, and they're called
Are they
king
black?
snakes.
Are they black?
We do, we have some, some are speckled, some are more black.
These were just black.
We don't have
And
any
they were
down,
big.
we don't have any down here, but they're called king snakes because their primary food source is the rattlesnake. So we do have king snakes in Texas. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any good like herping Facebook pages you would recommend? Like you have so many birding ones.
I was like, I'm on one, I'm trying to think of the name of it. I'll have to look, but yes, it's like the Texas Herptological whatever that it's part of that and with invertebrates as well, so it's like herps and invertebrates. But yes. The only problem with that is when you like post something, then people get so mad. Like if you accidentally put the wrong, like we were, like at Risaka, like our interpreter put the photo of the coral snake eating the rat snake, but she said bull snake. And it was just a plethora of like hate. And like she's not a herpetologist, so she's like, I'm sorry, I thought it was a dainty bull snake. And it was just like, blah, 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 blah. You guys don't know what you're talking about. I was like, oh, wow. I don't know if I like those Facebook pages. So. Oh, it was so mean. It's like, rat snake. Oh my gosh, she made the tiniest